each and every one of you for joining us here today. We all know this is a very difficult time for the business community. It's one of our first kind of major conferences as we've now moved to a much different platform. So we hope that it services you all well and gives you an opportunity to highlight and hear a number of different things that's going on behalf of the business community and also the state of Tennessee and some of the great things that they've been doing. If you have suggestions on any time improving our meeting platform, or if there's other issues that you ever want us to highlight, please let us know. I do want to thank our staff who's put a lot of time and energy into establishing these meetings and the work that they've done. The Tennessee Chamber, in addition, is working to start to think about what business recovery looks like. And we will be announcing in the next few weeks a recovery task force that will work hand in hand with Governor Lee's efforts. And we'll be hearing from them a little bit later, Commissioner Mark Ezell, who's heading up Governor Lee's efforts. In addition, also want to remind you all that we are recording this meeting so we can share it with you later. We're going to go ahead and automatically have all attendees muted, so to help our sound quality. And also, if you do have questions, we're going to try to provide opportunities for you all to be able to ask questions. You can chat the administrator, and as time allows us to, we want to hear your questions. In addition, we greatly appreciate our friends in the media. However, this meeting is closed to the press. If you have any questions about the Tennessee Chamber or any of our communication, please feel free to call us directly or email us at info@tnchamber.org. With that said, I do want to highlight Butch Ely is with us, Chief Operating Officer for Governor Bill Lee. Want to provide him an opportunity to make some comments. I know the work that they've been doing, not only communicating, but also making sure that Tennessee not only stays safe and healthy, but also to think through what business recovery efforts look like. They've been putting in a tremendous amount of work on this and a number of different areas, and we want to thank them for their efforts. And also, Butch Ely, I'll go ahead and turn over to you.
Hey, thank you, Bradley. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to join this group today. And I also know that we do have Commissioner Ezell, who is on already, as well as Commissioner McCord. And so glad that we could join today. The governor is in Chattanooga. Some of you may have seen he was down today visiting the tornado area and talking to folks. And certainly it seems that we can't keep having tornadoes and working between those and the virus, but we do know that Tennesseans are resilient and that we'll get through this, and we know that we'll come out on the other side. You know, the governor has obviously been very focused on the virus side of this, but as you saw yesterday, he certainly has realized that Tennessee cannot keep business closed forever. And so you saw yesterday the announcement that while we've had a group working very specifically on COVID with our unified command that Stuart McWhorter has headed up, we just announced yesterday that Mark Ezell would be coming over to head up and lead this economic recovery group. And so, as Bradley just said, we've already been meeting over the last month with an industry group that we've been more listening than talking, but listening to industry. And Bradley has been a part of that. And that's what Mark is going to start heading up, is working with business and industry over these coming weeks and months, really, on continuing to open up business again in Tennessee. And so appreciate being able to be with y'all today and listening more. And I'm sure we'll be joining later with Mark to hear more from him and Commissioner McCord. Thanks, Bradley.
Thank you very much, Butch. And as Butch suggested, we will have them on at 1:45 this afternoon, and we thank you all for joining us. So now we'll switch over to our first speaker, Dr. Jared Bigham. Dr. Bigham, Jared, as we refer to him as, has been with the Chamber now over a year, spearheading our education and workforce initiatives. And one of the most important questions we seem to get is what is going to happen kind of in the education realm. You know, how have things been impacted, and what can we start to do to think forward? Because recovery also will mean a lot to the education community, not only higher ed, but also K-12. Jared has a number of years of experience. You know, he's been down the trenches. He's actually run a school district, and he's also been a part of pretty much every major initiative regarding education reform, and we are proud to have him with us on behalf of the business community. Jared?
Great, thanks, Bradley. It's good to take a little bit of a break from being the principal of my local homeschool here and my 4 kids. So I know this is a challenging time for parents as well, as they're trying to help their kids still navigate some instruction with the remainder of the school year that we've got in the calendar year. And it's definitely been a challenge for our districts and our schools as they're trying to navigate for the first time 100% of online learning and figure out what platforms best service families and can help support teachers during this time as they're trying to navigate online education with 100% of their students. But if anything that we can find a silver lining during this time, it's been the pushing the discussion around connectivity and what resources are available to districts, what resources are available to families, and it's really put the conversation about the digital divide, especially in our rural communities and our concentrated areas of poverty in our state, really to the forefront, and is forcing us to take a hard look at our infrastructure and logistics around what distance learning actually looks like and what kind of supports and resources that we had in place and what we need to look at in the future as we're trying to build out better and high quality resources and platforms for parents. So there's definitely been some gaps that we've identified at the local level and the state level where we could improve, and it's really highlighted also some anecdotal experiences that districts and schools are having, even when they're able to get supports. It's helping us identify areas that people really hadn't thought about when they think about going to 100% connectivity. I know there's one cell phone company that gave all the middle school students in a rural district in Tennessee some iPads with data plans in hopes of those students being able to work at home on projects and stay connected to the instruction that teachers were trying to provide. But what they didn't realize is that 1/3 of the students in that rural county had no cell phone service where their homes were. So it's issues like that, challenges like that we're starting to uncover. And again, that if there's a silver lining to this situation, it's instances like that where we can see that there's, whether it's with hard lines or wireless internet, that we've definitely got some shoring up to do across the state and being able to give families access. And it's also, I think, helped us identify processes as a state for supporting local districts in as they're creating plans and learning from other states. I know one of the states that's probably leading the country right now in connectivity is North Dakota. And after 3 weeks of doing a statewide survey, they found that there's only 125 families now that aren't connected either with the proper equipment or with high-speed internet to be able to receive instruction. So we're learning lessons from other states and how we can not just provide resources, but how we do an inventory of what actually is out there and what's working is not working. And I know our General Assembly has been very supportive in trying to support the commissioner and our superintendents by passing legislation to make sure that students, teachers, and school aren't adversely affected by COVID-19, and waiving the requirement for end-of-year testing. So teacher evaluations won't be impacted by end-of-year testing. Student grades won't be impacted if a end-of-year test factored into their final grade, especially at the high school level. So we're fortunate that we've got policymakers that are really trying to be proactive in supporting our school districts and our commissioner, and really looking ahead also at how we can be intentional with resources from the federal government as part of the CARES Act. A little over 30 billion will be dispersed nationally to states to in the form of the education stabilization funding to help districts in the short term as they're trying to provide instruction to students, but also looking ahead over the summer and the beginning of the school year of how we can navigate these waters a little better and get some resources to fill those gaps. Again, whether it's not just connectivity, but it's also adequate tools in the homes, whether that's with iPads or laptops or computers that give students the ability to access instruction. So there's really two parts to this that we're navigating across school districts. It's getting connectivity in homes, but also the proper equipment that they need, that whether it's making sure that it's up to date as far as software goes, and also having parents giving them some easy guides to help them as they're, especially elementary students, they can support their students in accessing whether it's apps or software packages or online curriculum. So there's a lot of moving parts to this right now, and our Department of Ed just closed a survey yesterday that they had released to stakeholders across the state, getting feedback on how we can utilize those resources and best spend the money that will apply for the federal government at the local level. So hopefully I feel like we got some good responses back from what I'm hearing out of Nashville, that we can make an informed proposal for that investment from the federal government, and districts will be eligible to receive those funding, that funding based on their Title I formula percentages. So the thing that I like about this from a timeline standpoint is that it looks like the release of that funding will be fairly soon, as long as states have a comprehensive plan and that's intentional about supporting all districts across the state, especially with the eye to filling those gaps with equipment or with high-speed internet. So be looking for that announcement in the near future on Tennessee's plan that we're going to put forward to address that. Also, there's conversations around alternate calendars for in the K-12 space. Whether I mean, honestly, this year is shot. There's very doubtful that any kind of formal in-person instruction will happen this spring or even this summer, from the conversations that I've been a part of and the things that I'm hearing. And honestly, it's going to take some everyone working together in our current the procedures that we've got in place across the state as far as social distancing and the staying at home and making sure that we start to flatten that curve in order to be able to start school in early fall this coming year. So there's a lot of things that need to continue to work well that we've seen that are having a positive impact in order for us to get back on track. But there's been conversations around what the calendar might look like to recoup some of that lost instruction time this spring, whether it's an extended school day next year or an extended school year in 21. And so there's conversations about how we can recapture that, but also there's some human capital challenges that districts are looking at. For instance, if you were a school on a block schedule, where a high school on a block schedule where students take 4 different courses each semester, and you missed a core class this spring, how do they recoup that time next year and try to make faculty decisions around the high needs areas? For instance, if you were taking a government and economics classes that you have a certain scope and sequence on there, that you need to, you're going to have double the number of students that may need economics next fall in order to graduate on time. So it's a challenge right now for superintendents and principals looking at the schedule and trying to think ahead around staffing issues, because it's really, the calendar's really been thrown out of whack, and trying to keep students on that linear pathway to graduation on time. So those conversations are in the works right now. Also, there's been a pretty significant impact on higher ed, especially when we look at our TCATs that rely on quite a bit of seat time and hands-on instruction. So how do we navigate those waters if students can't go to school this spring, or if we have an alternate calendar that we're having to look at if it's a later start in the fall? And so really looking at innovative ways through virtual learning, even for some of these hands-on classes, that students can participate in. And I know there's some third-party companies that are really trying to support our post-secondary institutions, in particular community colleges and TCATs, with some virtual learning. And I wouldn't be surprised if some higher ed institutions don't have 100% of some of their programs that are online this fall, and to try to keep students on track and get their credential, their post-secondary credential on time. So again, a lot of moving parts on completion of courses, but also in the counseling area, where we've got Tennessee Promise, we've got Tennessee Reconnect, and the spring is really that hotbed time that we're counseling students and helping them sign up for some of these amazing programs we have at the state level and be able to access those programs. But it becomes a pretty Herculean task to connect with students virtually, and instead of being able to set a room full of seniors down in the library and talk to 100 students that are about to graduate and help them navigate those Tennessee Promise waters and be able to access the supports that are out there. So I know our counselors are working 60, 70-hour weeks at the high school level and at the post-secondary level to try to help students right now in accessing resources that we have as a state. So even when we have those tools at our disposal to be able to connect with students virtually, it's still a challenge, especially for our bigger high schools. One, that just it becomes a issue of scale. And then for our rural communities where students, a third or a half may not have connectivity. So how do counselors support those students and get them signed up for the programs they need to support their ongoing post-secondary education? So we're going to be learning some tough lessons, but again, I think there's a silver lining in this that is going to help us prepare for the future and what the new normal is going to look like. And the new normal, even at the K-12 level and the post-secondary level, when we are able to go back to school, it's going to be some waters that we're trying to navigate for the first time in how do we handle an outbreak a cluster of an outbreak that might happen in a school or a district. And I've been listening to some of the press briefings that Dr. Fauci has been talking about next school year and what that may look like, and some policies and procedures we're going to have to put in place. So those are going to be some important conversations that we'll be having here in the spring, summer, preparing for when we are able to get students back in a classroom. So I know parents, there's been some challenges around parents, especially those that work full-time. Both parents work full-time, and trying to help their elementary age students, middle age students in doing schoolwork, that if they are able to connect with their local schools. And one of the things that I've been encouraging parents is I've been on different video conferences, and we've been having some of these conversations, is to really help them get over that guilt that a lot of them are feeling, that they don't feel adequate in supporting their child in at-home learning. And so I think that we've got to, we're going to be creating resources and having conversations around supporting parents in the future when they are helping to navigate and facilitate that at-home learning. And one thing I would just say for those of you that are parents that are on as part of our membership, just don't feel guilty about that. I mean, I can tell you as a father of four that, number one, none of them seem to care that I've got a doctorate degree in education and I've been a principal and a district leader, that they, it's for a person that is a fourth generation educator and has lived, breathed, eaten, slept, drunk education his whole professional life. It's been a challenge for me. So don't feel guilty about that at-home learning you're trying to facilitate. That I think that this has been there's been a steep learning curve for all of us. So I'm encouraged by some of the toolkits that I know are being developed for parents in the future, should a situation like this arise, or even if we have a delayed start time on our school year next year, that there will be more resources in place for parents to help them navigate this situation. So I know that there's some of you have posed some questions. I'm seeing in the chat that if you've got a question about the K-12 space or higher ed space, I'm happy to try to answer any of those. But I will say, I think the litmus test for our state and really our country is when our students are able to physically get back in the school. That's going to be one of our major signals that we are returning back to normal. It's not necessarily when our businesses crank back up, even at 100%. I think our education system is that true litmus test, is when we're able to turn the corner on this situation. So, Carolyn, do we have any questions out there? I know I've got a text from you.
Yeah, I can read it out loud for you, Jared, if you want. We did get one question.
I got it right here. I think, can we discuss ideas for how business can support persistence? I
was supposed to say continuing toward.
Oh, not confusing toward.
No.
Well, auto-correct. Continuing toward post-secondary degrees among higher ed students and post-COVID-19. Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the unfortunate or one of the many unfortunate things that have come out of this is that our work-based learning programs, by and large, were shut down when schools closed. That I know we had some pretty robust programs, especially in Jackson, Madison County. I know Dr. Miracle was leading some work-based learning programs out there with 6 or 7 companies in Chattanooga, and Hamilton County has a robust work-based learning program. Marion County and some others that had to halt those because of the COVID-19 situation. And I think one of the things that businesses can do is, when we are able to crank those work-based learning programs back up, is to help support those, because that is a really good conduit for students in transitioning from high school into post-secondary programs in different sectors that related to the credential that they would like to obtain, and they can also work at the same time. And I honestly, I think that's going to be one of the solutions when we are able to start getting our workforce back up and going, is these work-based learning programs that will have companies have instant access to employees that can work part-time shifts in order to fill full-time shifts. So I think that would be the number one things that industry leaders can do to help promote persistence is really looking at those work-based learning programs, supporting those. I see another question. Do you know how many kids in Tennessee / Davidson County don't have high-speed access and or proper device? I've seen it's really hard to capture that because you've got different state agencies that have been trying to get numbers on that, in particular our Department of Ed. And the numbers I've seen, and again, this has been pretty fast and loose that they've been trying to capture this, but right around a third don't have access to a high speed or a proper device. And again, that's both of those, both sides of that coin. It's not just about high speed, it's having equipment that can handle the high speed and actually do the work on. So right now it's pretty safe numbers, a third. It differs in each county and each area based on, honestly, around socioeconomic status. So that's definitely an area that we will be addressing as a state moving forward.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jared. We appreciate that. I know we're all eager to learn kind of, once things do, whenever get back up and running, what changes, or opportunities that exist out there. So we thank you very much, and we'll move on. If you do have questions for Jared, feel free to, you can chat him or send them to the administrator here. But next, Commissioner Jeff McCord, the Tennessee Department of Labor. Commissioner McCord, we've certainly known him for a number of years. Spent about vice president at Northeast State, and then prior to that, 20 years in the corporate world with Eastman Chemical. So he has a good, strong history of managing complex organizations. And I know that is currently suiting you well. But Commissioner, we thank you for your time, and I know you all have a lot going on there at the Tennessee Department of Labor. So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. I think it may be beneficial to walk through what has changed and then kind of talk about where we are in Tennessee right now. And so typically the unemployment insurance system is just that. It's an insurance system where a typical W-2 wage employer would pay into that system. And should those wages be interrupted, they basically apply for, just like you would if you had a tree fall through your house, apply for those benefits to cover at least some of those wages. And so that is still in existence. What has changed with the CARES Act is there's something called the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation Program, which takes that benefit that a typical employee would get and adds $600 to it. And so whatever your benefit is from the state, the federal government will add additional $600 to it, and that is weekly amount that you get. So as of, we've started adding that benefit this week, and so tomorrow 110,000 or so Tennesseans will see that benefit. We've paid first 2 days of this week, we're at 110,000, and we expect that number to cross 150,000 and head toward 200,000 by the end of the week. So that is what federal pandemic unemployment compensation is. It adds to the Tennessee unemployment compensation that you traditionally would have. In addition to that, there is PUA, which is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, and that basically sets up a system for folks who aren't in that unemployment insurance system. Typically those are 1099 employees. It sets up a whole nother system to give them basically the same benefit, a benefit that would be the same or nearly the same if they were in the state system, and then add additional $600 to that. So those two payments, for example, could be $720 if you get 120 from the first batch of money, and then $600 added. All that money, though, that does not come out of the trust fund. All that money is federal as well, and basically sets up a whole nother system for those employers. We are in the process of standing that up right now. Like I said, it's another system, so we're not talking in terms of weeks. And I know there's a lot of anticipation there. We know of maybe 1 or 2 states who've started that on their programs already, but just started on their programs. And so there is a lot of complexity in setting that particular system up. The other provisions in the CARES Act are around extension of benefits. So if benefits expire, then the federal money will pick that up and continue those for a number of weeks. So with the department, I think we're fighting a couple of things. One is just the suddenness and the magnitude of the claim volume. So I think the governor has mentioned 25 times the volume that we traditionally would see. And really it's 25 to 30 times. We would typically see over a 3-week period, 10,000 claims and initial claims, and we're at 250,000 over, the last 3-week period. So we're fighting system capability, processing capability issues. And we know that, and we're working on a variety of things to try to address that. But the system does show periods of slowness, and it's frustrating, and we're working to alleviate that as we go forward. So I think right now we have, let me mention this too, we have moved, of course, the call volume goes up as well. And so as of Monday, we added another 100 FTEs to the 200 plus that we already had added to help with the claim volume. So when this thing started, we had about 20 folks who were doing what now 320 or so are on the front line trying to accomplish. I think if I break it down very simply, we've got the $600 adder, and we're there. And so we have 2 more major issues to solve. One is the system capability issue. And then the second would be setting up this new system for the 1099 folks. Again, I don't have a specific date on either of those, but we're not weeks and weeks away from doing that. We're a lot closer to that. And so I think that's the message that I would want to leave. And with that, I'll pause and see if there's anything else, Bradley, that you would like to know about.
Thank you, Commissioner. Carolyn, we do have some questions rolling in.
We do, Commissioner McCord, if you're open to answering a few of these.
Sure, absolutely.
I'm going to kind of work from the bottom up as they've been sent in. When a person does receive a job, will the unemployment benefits immediately be stopped?
Say that again for me.
Once someone does come back into employment, once they are in a job, will the unemployment benefits immediately be stopped?
So you certify weekly, and I hate to have this answer, but it depends. It depends on the amount of wages earned the previous week. And it depends on the amount that you are earning. And so eventually with that job at a certain level of employment, the benefits will stop, yes. And so, but immediately or not depends on the level of income that you begin to earn.
Okay.
Commissioner, I would add too that we've been hearing from employers already that some of their employees have come to them and saying, why don't you lay me off? Because I want to be eligible for unemployment. Regarding kind of work search requirements and all that, we've heard employers are fearful that, they may offer someone a job and of course they don't take it. And I'm not sure if there's a way that they can, notify you all of those situations.
Well, so yes, so we're very aware of that. And it's a headwind when we start turning the corner of this to get people back to work. So we are working with the federal government to talk through, okay, when can we begin to re-engage these work search requirements? And we have thought of, for example, once we are at a stable place and we begin to turn, is there a employer hotline that they can call us that they've offered? And so we're thinking through that, all of those things, so we can make sure our job has been and still remains is to move people off of unemployment as soon as possible and into gainful employment. And that job will still be the same, as we move through the COVID-19 issue.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to continue on if that's all right with a couple more questions.
Sure.
What if your employees decline the offer to return to work because they are receiving more in EU benefits than what the company can pay them?
So that's back to the same question. I do know that we will have means for the employers to communicate with us. And when we put the work search requirements back together and back on, then we'll be able to capture that at the certification process each week. And if you have the offer of employment and you're eligible for and able for employment and you turn it down, then benefits stop.
Okay, thank you. Another company employer question. If someone is planning a mass layoff, if we submit the names ahead of time, does that improve the lead time for those employees to get their benefits?
Yeah, so that is a great question. And there is a certain information that you can give. We call it a partial claims filing. And we have folks that will receive that and can upload that file. And that should reduce the cycle time in that process. As we've experienced volume trouble, we experience problems with that process as well, but we're working through our backlog, and it is a much better way to go if the employer is willing to do that.
That was a good question. I'm sure a lot of people would be interested. We'll have to share that information as well. Another question for you, is there anything being considered to address experience rating concerns that businesses may have?
So that is high on our list of priorities to walk through, and the answer is yes, we're looking at that. And I guess the whole mentality there would be to hold businesses harmless during this period in terms of their experience rating, and we're definitely looking at measures like that.
Great, thank you. I'm looking through a few more questions. I know that was actually, we had a second question that matched that one. Let's see.
Carolyn, let me ask a question. I've just got one.
Sure.
Regarding TOSHA, more occupational safety and health. If you do have, are there requirements if you do have an employee that's confirmed with the virus, any sort of, recommendations in terms of, shutting down, cleaning, or anything like that? And in addition, are you all requesting that maybe manufacturers modify kind of their line structure for social distancing?
So we have no other further guidance than CDC guidance, Bradley. The CDC guidance is the guidance. We are not empowered to enforce that guidance, but that is the guidance that we suggest and consult that employers use.
Thank you.
All right, great. I think we have time still for another question or two. Until the employment search is put back in place, how can an employer contest the claim of an employee who has been offered a return to work after a layoff?
So that process is still in place. We have the same process that we will touch base with the employer. And if we receive information, then that process will work just like it always has. The additional benefits do not cut that process short, that communication with the employer.
Okay, this is a question kind of numbers wise. Of the 250,000 individuals who have filed claims so far, do you have any information on how many have received payments?
So yeah, 110,000 got payments the Monday and Tuesday. And so we'll get payments tomorrow for Monday and Tuesday. And that number continues to climb. We were about 110,000 all of last week, and we've matched that already. Some of those 250,000 though are 1099 employees, and we are keeping those claims so that when we stand the system up, they don't have to reapply. We'll reach out to them if we need additional information, but it'll be a proactive on the department's part. So some of that 250, I don't have an exact number, but are folks who are self-employed who have applied basically through the old system. And so we're keeping those claims so that we can, once we stand up the new system, we can go back and get them and pull them over. So That's a long answer to your short question, but so far this week, 110,000 people have been paid.
Great, thank you. The same question just came across twice for me here. Do you think there will be any grace? This is one question for employers who missed the new 4-day deadline per the governor's executive order in answering those contested claims.
So we have not implemented the 4-day deadline yet. And so we're gathering some more information about that. But we have not implemented it yet.
Okay, and I think we have time at least for one more. Could you discuss a little bit about partial furlough benefits? The example given here is if a worker's schedule has been reduced by 20%, but they still make more than $275 a week, would they be eligible for some of those benefits?
So it's always, and I've been cautioned and consulted always to start with it depends, which I hate that phrase actually, but it depends. We encourage people to apply because every situation is different depending on household and a variety of factors. And so apply to see if they qualify for those benefits. And if they don't necessarily qualify for the state benefits, they may pass through the funnel into the other system, and they will run through both systems before we decide, whether they're approved or denied.
Commissioner, I've gotten a question. Determining employer costs in addition, as the state portion of the 275 starts to be pulled down, Tennessee employers inevitably will go into different rate schedules. Do you all have any authority to modify that, or is that in statute that employers' costs will go up as kind of a total fund balance drains down?
So Bradley, we're looking at that too. Understand it's a issue, and I believe the next reading is in June. So that is like the experience rating. We've started conversations on that and are very, very aware of that desire and that issue from the employer standpoint. So we don't have any decisions on that yet, but we're working through those.
Thank you. Carolyn, we probably have time for one more.
One more just came in. Will $600 per week be retroactive to when employees first applied?
Yes, it'll be retroactive if they've become eligible as of March 29th. And so, for example, the first payment that went out for Monday and Tuesday was actually $94 million. And later in the week, we'll go back and catch those folks who were eligible for back pay. But if the question is there going to be back pay, the answer is yes.
Great, thank you. And a lot of comments rolling in. Thank you for your time as well.
Well, thank you.
Commissioner, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I know you all are working extreme hours, and you and your staff, so please tell them thank you on behalf of the business community.
I certainly will. Thank you for the time.
All right. Moving on next, we have Commissioner Mark Ezell, who's going to join us. Commissioner Ezell recently was appointed by Governor Lee to lead the Economic Recovery Task Force. Commissioner Ezell, we are glad to have you with us. I know you've had a lot of experience in private industry, and playing point on this is very important. And we thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you, Bradley. It's good to be with y'all. We had a family business for many decades, and certainly the role that the chamber played both at a state and local level was so critical. So thank you for what you do every day to help all of us as business people. I'm very much thankful that I get to work with this passionate group of commissioners who've been tackling this problem for several weeks, and the talented industry leaders that we are getting to work with. Do believe in collaboration, and I think like the governor and Butch and the key leaders, we've got Tennesseans that can help us with good solutions if we can work together and collaborate. So we are working with the Unified Command Unit. I've known Stuart for many years. General Brower and General Holmes and Commissioner Piercy have both started to catch me up. I'm on I think in just a minute, hour number 26. So still just a whole lot to learn in the process. But again, we've had a lot of people on the governor's team and with our commissioner groups and industry experts that have been working on this for quite a while. And I've been a part of the Industry Advisory Council. It made some sense for us to have a key leadership role in the sense that the leisure and hospitality was really the tip of the spear. And as the leading GDP driver for our economy, tourism and hospitality was the first group to really have to shut down and to react. And so I know Commissioner McCord has helped a lot of the folks in the hospitality world as they've navigated through these new waters of layoffs and furloughs. I think that what we have done is started creating industry-specific groups under the direction of Butch Ely, COO Ely, and a number of others to really try to get collective groups around specific industries to be tackling and presenting to us what I call rap sheets. Ready, the R is for the readiness for operations for the consumer and the customer when we're able to be serving those, and then the preparation of those businesses or those organizations or even those single proprieties. How are we ready on testing and PPE, social mitigation? How are we getting ready like Commissioner McCord just mentioned about our laborers? What's that new phased in business model going to look like? So clearly right now, my role is just learning a lot, taking in a lot of input, seeing what we've already been processing and deciding on, and how do I come alongside the team, help us with your industry and others to how we communicate, how we collaborate, how do we build plans, and then work with the Unified Command Unit and also a command center and the governor's office in developing a strategy on when it's time, then the how it's time, and we phase in a program that can bring economic recovery and success that all of us we know we need to get back to work. And certainly all the local and state governments are counting on that too. And so there are just so many pieces that need to come together for us to safely create work environments to allow people and industry to re-engage. And so that process is going to change. I thought I would just share. I haven't shared on a screen, so we're going to see if this even works. Host disabled participant screen sharing. So hopefully we're going to pull up. I don't know. Can y'all see that?
No, I'm not seeing.
Okay. All right. Well, I didn't know how to share screen, so I'm not sure I'm able to be able to share a screen. But what I was going to share were just a couple of quick slides. Because the tip of the spear was in the hospitality, the hospitality business by April the 4th had gone from being over 3% in February to being under by 85%. And so what we had showed was a word cloud that many of you see. The one word Americans say best describe how they feel about travel right now. And certainly if you saw that screen, it would be scared or unsafe or cautious or bad, scary, danger, kinds of things. And so as we are working on our research, we'll be not only doing the research that are important for our traveling community to come back into our communities and spend money with us, but our current Tennesseans or our current Nashvillians or wherever we live, how do we effectively create work environments that can ease those concerns? And certainly that's going to be part of our task force to be working with to drive that economic recovery when we can, when not only do we know we have permission, but we have a methodology that'll work that can be assured those people who need to be working, and then also the patients or the customers and consumers that they serve. So I'm honored to get to serve in this situation and work with a great group of people on the governor's team, the commissioners, and other industry people. And our job is going to be come up with good solutions along with what everyone is bringing to us and provide that guidance to the governor and then follow his leadership along with the Unified Command Center.
Commissioner Carolyn with the Tennessee Chamber did have a question for you. What input would the task force appreciate having from members of the business community throughout the state?
Oh, that's a great question. And we're still learning and determining best paths. I can tell you that on the industry business council or industry advisory council that we've had, different commissioners would have different groups of folks who were working on specific problems. Right now, in the last week, we have, for example, a group of restaurant owners that represent geographically, they're diverse in terms of that some are family style, fast food, other kinds of groups. And that group, we had a kickoff meeting, but then that group is going to go and work on specific recommendations that they believe are the right kinds of ways if and when we get clearance to start phasing in, what would those look like under our new normal, under our new guidelines with PPE and testing and all those options. So what we know is that government is not to solve, government is to facilitate people, help in the problem solving piece. So we've done that now with a hotels group and a restaurant group and a tourist attraction group and many others that we're going to be enlisting to have those groups work, see if they can find consensus that shows a diverse approach and a safe approach to being able to get back in business. So we're going to be asking businesses over time to make sure that they're serving. Most of those will be in small groups, specifically around certain types of groups that are feeling like they are able to, under whatever guidelines they can create that can be approved to get back in business. And then those are the ideas that those consensus ideas will be brought to the governor's team and the rest of the commissioners and the leadership groups with the Unified Command Center to roll those up.
Thank you, Commissioner. Also, regarding the CARES Act, we've seen reports that Tennessee will receive between $2.6 to $3 billion. In terms of those funds and you all's flexibility in using those, can they be utilized for economic recovery efforts, or are they earmarked specifically?
I might let Butch Ely and some of the others who've been following the specific pieces. We've been tourism focused as it looked at the CARES unit. So that's why it's going to be so important for us to glean through the information that a lot of the team at the governor's office have been working with, and then also with our commissioners, each kind of taking their own specific area of responsibility.
Hey, what was the question again?
Hey, Butch, just thinking through the CARES Act, the appropriation that Tennessee is going to receive, how flexible kind of are those funds, and what major categories will they be utilized in?
Well, it's a great question, of which we've got a whole group of people that are focused on this. A lot of the funds coming through the CARES Act are already earmarked for certain causes. There's earmarks for human services related activities. There's earmarks for transit related activities. And so it's kind of all across the board, as you might imagine. But we are setting up, similarly to we are in other areas, setting up a whole group within this that is relating to Unified Command and our Finance Administration Office that is tracking all of these funds. I mean, they're not coming in yet, but they will be. And as they do, we're tracking that to make sure that we know what's coming in and we know where it's supposed to be utilized. And then there are a lot of activities which are going to be, in essence, reimbursable as a function of the expenditures that we're already making that are COVID related, to make sure that that those activities are covered. So they're going to be used all across the board in many different departments, as you might imagine, because if you've seen today, Commissioner McCord talk about the $600 that he's beginning to reel out to Tennesseans, and so they're good. They're going to be utilized for many different areas, but we're compiling all of that and making sure that all of those are being able to be utilized in the right way.
Thank you. Carolyn, do you have another question?
I do. A question about the task force and the economic recovery plan. What role do you see will the Department of ECD, Economic and Community Development, play?
Well, they're going to play a huge role. Reached out and continued again. Commissioner Rolfe and his team have been a part of the industry council. We had a conversation earlier today about setting up various groups that ECD will help lead for input pieces. And we talked about the automotive world. We talked about some of the retail world and a number of those kinds of classifications and industry groups that will be helpful, because what we want to try to do is make sure we're understanding what each of those areas need for that preparedness, and what are going to be their impediments to being able to be back in business, and then what are the key items that they're going to need to be addressing on a social mitigation or a business model standpoint. So Commissioner Rolfe and his team will be leading a number of those and working with folks as we build out those special groups to give us input.
Great. And another question about representation on the task force and input. What will the role of fitness facilities play? We know that those were one of the first types of industry-specific groups to be closed. So is there any role that you see them playing within the task force itself?
Well, I think again we're gonna have a task force that certainly has a great representation, and then we're going to try to have these individual groups, and certainly things like fitness club, hairdressers, other kinds of groups that have niche areas that were greatly affected by COVID-19 and have limited their ability to be in business at all. And so those are the kinds of subgroups that we plan on trying to create so that we get those voices going through a funneling system that gets that representation to us. So as far as the specific makeup of the ERG, that group, we haven't talked with all the commissioners and the governors about the specifics of who those are. But what we want to make sure we're doing is going deeper out into the communities with greater representation in small groups that get back information to us so that we can have the best to make decisions from.
Commissioner, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate your time. And as you all have more questions for the Commissioner, you can feel free to send those over to us. And we look forward to working with you, Commissioner, and your team. Next, we have an update on Tennessee Chamber's Creators Respond initiative. Kelly Boutwell and Denise Rice will be giving us updates. The effort was launched I guess it's been about 10 days ago, as the Chamber continued to hear from manufacturers who are interested in finding ways that they could help either manufacture, make modifications to provide needed PPEs across the state. So Kelly, thank you very much.
Thanks, Bradley, and thanks everyone for taking time out of your day to join us for this conference. Quick update, Denise Rice, our manufacturing consultant, engineer, and my partner on this project, lives in Cleveland, Tennessee, and thankfully she is okay, but they had a little bit of damage, and so she couldn't make it with us today, so I'll cover a little bit of ground. So as Bradley mentioned, our manufacturers across the state started pivoting and retooling operations pretty quickly. And then they started reaching out to us because they might be working on one project but missing an important component needed for particular PPE, and really looked to us to say, hey, we want to do this, we can do this, but we need a little bit of help with collaboration. So about 10 days ago, we launched this Tennessee Creators Respond, modeled after National Association of Manufacturers Creators Respond on the national level, but kind of taking it a little bit further and doing those connections on the ground in Tennessee between those that can help and then those and connecting them with those that need help. And some examples are, connecting folks who can produce ethanol with folks that are creating sort of foundational health and sanitary products, connecting those that have sewing capabilities so that they can potentially manufacture the base components of some of the most needed PPE. And what we're hearing across the board is those most needed PPE items are isolation gowns, N95 masks, but really any sort of thing, face shields. That's the kind of stuff that we're working on. So if you are a manufacturer, if you have a peer that could potentially help, please have them reach out to us. You can do that on our website, either by going directly to www.tnchamber.org/responds or just tnchamber.org and click right through to connect with us. So you'll just let me know if you have any questions.
Kelly, this is Carolyn. I have a question. I know
Sure.
how many calls and how much time you and Denise have both spent connecting with manufacturers and healthcare providers. Just your overall thought, what is the need? I mean, I know you've been on the phone with lots of different healthcare facilities. Is it overwhelming? And I mean, are we meeting the demand that we need to fulfill our state?
Well, right now, I think we're working very hard on that. The demand for those basic PPE materials is real. And it sometimes can be hard to hear from providers across the state that say, hey, I need 4, face masks, or I need 100 isolation gowns. And really the idea is assessing, this provider is in West Tennessee. Well, what manufacturers in that area could potentially provide a solution to those local needs. So we've had about 100 manufacturers reach out to us, and probably 30 or 40 specific providers representing hundreds and hundreds of facilities and providers across the state. So still kind of working out the kinks. Some of the things that you need to consider with regard to manufacturing are, what are your bill of materials? Another challenge is, what are the design specs? What are the material specs? What are the safety considerations? So all of those things are kind of being worked out in real time as well.
Great. And then one more question. And we did have a question also asking for contact info. I'll be happy to send that in the chat to everybody. Besides healthcare workers, are there any other groups that we will be donating the PPP to, or the PPE, like prisons or homeless shelters? I'm not sure on that.
Right now, we've primarily been connecting them with the folks at Unified Command and TEMA, but also if there is an opportunity for a direct connection with a provider, we are doing that as well. So we're doing a little bit of both.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think, Lauren, we are going to go over to you next.
Thanks, y'all.
Hey, everyone. Hey, everyone. I'm Lauren Cecil of the Tennessee Chamber. I'm here to introduce our next presenter, Margaret Dolan, who is President and CEO of Launch Tennessee. For those of you who don't know, Launch Tennessee is a public-private partnership that supports entrepreneurs within the state. And in March, Governor Lee, Director McWhorter, and the COVID-19 Unified Command partnered with Launch Tennessee to assist in Tennessee's response efforts, which is what Margaret is going to update us on. So I'll now hand it over to Margaret.
Thank you, Lauren. Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up. Awesome.
We can hear you.
So thanks for spending this time. Launch Tennessee is really honored to be part of this process. And I credit Governor Lee and Commissioner McWhorter, Director McWhorter, for their insight in recognizing that small business, the innovation economy, startups, entrepreneurs across the state could really have a lot to offer in terms of solutions to the current circumstance that we're fighting with COVID-19. So in thinking about how we might design that effort, we came up with an idea to launch the Tennessee Innovation Crowdsource Platform, which many of you have probably seen. So that was actually formally launched on March the 30th. And this morning I reported out to the governor that we have 901 vendors registered on that site. 52, that was up 4.8% from yesterday morning's report. 52% of those companies are Tennessee companies, and they have put forward 328 proposals for needs that they might want to address. The Launch Tennessee team has evaluated 260 of those proposals and sent them onto the state. What we immediately saw when we initially sort of came in to say, what can the startup community offer, was that the real pain point was that our State Department of Health, TEMA, others, our procurement system was not built to accommodate this magnitude and this enormous need on the one hand, an enormous body of companies that wish to fulfill that need. We're built for a much lower level of activity. And so rather than just make this platform available for early stage companies, it's available for anyone. And so what we've been able to do is provide sort of a first level review before we then move it forward to Department of Health or TEMA for furthering the procurement process. It's been a great privilege to be a part of it. So some of what I was listening earlier about the need for PPE and other things. What organizations, whether it's first line responders, whether it's a clinic or anyone who needs PPE, the best thing they can do is let their local public health department know. All of that information is feeding up through a system that comes together at state public health, and that gives all of us the best view toward what are the needs and what is the highest pain point. So is it in West Tennessee? Is it in the rurals? Is it in the metros? And so on and so forth. Shipments are coming in every day, and they're limited in their ability to get them to the right place unless people make sure that they let their local health department know what the needs are. But people are working really, really hard. As I listen to various folks who are in the know talk about Tennessee's efforts compared with many other states' efforts, it appears to me that we are far superior in the number of tests that we've actually conducted. Which is why sometimes our numbers look a little higher than neighboring states, but it's because we have conducted so many tests. And also, although we do have some pockets where people might be feeling they don't have enough PPE, we've got it coming in every day. We're trying to keep people focused on what do you need for 2 weeks. Many of these institutions are used to having a 30-day supply, and they start sort of feeling a little panicked when they don't have 30 days. But what we're really trying to fulfill is a 2-week supply so that everybody has enough to get them through the next 2 weeks on a rolling basis. So that's really all I have from just a straight report out, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that people have.
Margaret, this is Carolyn with the Chamber. Thank you so much for that update. We do have a question, if you might know, in regards to the Governor's Unified Command, if they will be putting forward any immunity or any type of liability executive order for the companies that have shifted and are now making PPE during this crisis instead of their normal manufactured goods. Are you aware of anything that might be offered?
The only thing that I've seen is there was a company that came across that was donating equipment, and there's sort of a standard letter that departments of health or police departments or whomever can issue to the folks who are donating the equipment, and it does grant that immunity under the current executive orders that are in place. And I'll send a draft of that letter to you, and maybe you can put it on your website.
That would be great. Thank you. All right. And if anybody else, just to mention again, does have questions, you're welcome to send those. I know Allison Dembeck with the U.S. Chamber has a tight timeline. So Margaret, I think we're going to thank you so much for your time. And we would love to pass on that information that you just mentioned to everyone. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Lauren, we will pass it back.
Thank you, Carolyn. So up next, we have Allison Dembeck, who is the Executive Director in the Congressional and Public Affairs Division at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. She focuses on education, labor, and workforce development issues. Prior to work at the Chamber, she worked with a U.S. Senate Policy Committee as an analyst, and then prior to that, as a U.S. Legislative Assistant. Allison is going to give us a federal update of the CARES Act, and so now I'll send it over to Allison.
Great, thank you everyone, and thanks for inviting me, and I hope you all are able to be home and safe. I'm going to try to run through everything as quickly as possible and maybe leave some time for questions at the end. So I know there's a lot of information to go over. As you probably know, there's actually been 3 bills that have passed Congress since the beginning of March. The first, the phase 1 bill, the first one was really an appropriations bill, $8.3 billion in funding that focused on vaccine research, support for states and localities, and then there was some small business disaster assistance in the bills at that point. And then the second bill that went through, it was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, Phase 2. That was March 18th, and that was where there was a lot of emergency relief for the food assistance programs, as well as the paid leave requirements and some loosening of the unemployment insurance restrictions, kind of building on what some of the regulations that the U.S. Secretary of Labor had done at that point. And then finally, on March 27th, Phase 3, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act, was passed, and that was a $2 trillion bill, and it includes a lot of stuff. I'm going to kind of focus on the business side of things. There were a number of healthcare provisions and all in there too. One of the big things it did is that it did, the CARES Act did expand the unemployment program. At this point, you probably are familiar with this, but it extended it for 13 weeks, as well as included a $600 per worker per week enhancement that goes through July 31st. The federal government is picking up the tab for that $600 a week per worker. Now, in order to be eligible for unemployment insurance, is actually under the special unemployment insurance for COVID-19. It is actually pretty specific, right? It's about having a diagnosis or symptoms and seeking medical attention. It's about somebody in your household or somebody who you are caring for as a member of your family who has been diagnosed. It's about school or daycare closures because the individual is the primary caregiver, workplace lockdowns or workplaces being closed because of coronavirus. You've been advised by a healthcare provider that you need to self-quarantine. Maybe you have had a job offer, you're about to start the job, but the job no longer exists because of coronavirus. Maybe you had to quit a job because of circumstances resulting from coronavirus, and that's usually more meaning that you've had the disease, you've recovered, but there are complications, and so you can't go back to work. It's not just kind of randomly you decide you don't want to work anymore because of coronavirus. It's actually pretty specific. And then the final kind of certification would be that a person is now the primary breadwinner of a household because someone has passed away because of coronavirus. If you're receiving paid sick leave or paid FMLA leave, you are not eligible. If you're eligible for telework, you're also not eligible for this. So that is pretty specific. There are very often some kind of confusion about this, but if an employee is eligible to receive more money through unemployment, then they are getting paid to work, but the employer has asked the employee to return to work, and the employee is able to. If the employee quits, that person is no longer eligible for unemployment, for the unemployment benefits. So it's possible that is a scenario that they would earn more on unemployment, but it doesn't really matter. If they quit, they're no longer unemployed. They've decided to quit because of their own, not because you haven't asked them to come back to work. Additionally, there's also some questions about whether being afraid of getting the virus would qualify somebody for getting unemployment insurance. And the answer is, not only does it not include, not only is that a valid reason, it's also not a valid reason for the paid sick leave or the paid FMLA leave either. So just those are very often the questions that I get about the UI, and so it really is a pretty specific reason. In terms of the business provisions, there's some provisions that apply to everybody, and then there's some provisions for kind of the more large size employers, and then a number of small size employer provisions. So the provisions that apply to everybody are the tax provisions. And the two main ones I'm going to mention are that there is a delay in the employer payroll taxes between now and January 1st. And so the way it'll work now is that 50% of employer payroll taxes will be due on December 31st, 2021. And then the remaining 50% will be due on December 31st, 2022. The one caveat to this is, if you are a business that is participating in the payroll protection program, which I'll talk about in a minute, then you're not eligible for this delay in payroll taxes, because the assumption is that you've been given money through the PPP program to help cover your costs, so you should have the money to be able to pay your payroll taxes. The other big tax program in the CARES Act is a employee retention credit for employers that are subject to closure because of COVID-19. And what that means is, it's not just being partially or fully closed, which is part of it, but it could also mean that you've experienced a decline in gross receipts by more than 50% in a quarter compared to that same quarter in 2019. And it's a 50% tax credit for the first $10,000 of compensation for each eligible employee, and that includes the employer portion of healthcare benefits. The credit only applies for wages after March 12th and before January 1st, and it doesn't include any of the paid sick or paid leave requirements under the Phase 2 bill, the Family First Act. And the reason for that, again, is because those are 100% fully tax refundable, so you can't get a tax refund twice. They really frown on double dipping. So in terms of programs for the mid and large size employers, there were $500 billion in loans, loan subsidies, and supports for Federal Reserve credit facilities in the CARES Act. Some of it is industry specific. So there was $25 billion in loans for air carriers and air maintenance and ticket agents, $4 billion in loans for cargo air carriers, $17 billion for businesses critical to maintaining national security, and then the remaining $454 billion is for businesses, states, and municipalities. Now, you may have been hearing about the Main Street Business Lending Program. That's part of this, and that program, the purpose is to help small and mid-sized companies, and what they're doing is they're defining that as businesses up to 10,000 employees or up to 2.5 billion in 2019 annual revenues. But it's to help those companies that were in good financial standing before the pandemic. Borrowers under that program need to maintain payroll and retain workers, because the whole idea, and this is a theme through the small business programs too, is to keep businesses liquid and to keep everybody on payroll and to help them maintain their health insurance, right? So as you're thinking about these programs, that is the goal of all of this, right? So a requirement in participating in the Main Street Business Lending Program is maintaining payroll and retaining workers. And then you must comply with all of the CARES Act requirements on executive compensation and stock buybacks and dividends and capital distributions and conflicts of interests, because there are a bunch of restrictions that are put into place for these larger companies in terms of what you can do if you receive some of these loans. If you're a small business who is participating in the PPP, you are still eligible for the Main Street Business Lending Program as well. And this is one of those programs that's going to go through your regular bank, through your regular lender. Loans are ranging from $1 million to $150 million, and they have a 4-year term. Principal and interest can be deferred for up to a year. Now, the program isn't quite up and running yet, so everything that I told you about it, also there could end up being more restrictions. We've been seeing some of that happening as there are, as regulations have come out. But the Federal Reserve is taking comments on the program through April 16th, so there's still a few more days with that. That kind of brings us to the Paycheck Protection Program, which I'm sure you guys have also been hearing a lot about. That's the $350 billion program that is modeled off of the SBA 7A program. It's for small businesses as defined by SBA standards. So generally we're talking about under 500 employees. It's for anybody in the accommodation or food services sector that has less than 500 employees in each location. 501c3 nonprofits, not 501c6s, but 501c3 nonprofits and veterans organizations and tribal organizations that have fewer than 500 employees are eligible, and then sole proprietors, self-employed, and independent contractors are eligible. And these loans have a 1% interest rate on a 2-year term. They're 100% guaranteed, and there is a loan forgiveness aspect built in. If you're interested in applying, these go also directly through your bank. There are thousands of banks, including community banks, that are already eligible because they were SBA approved already, and then additional lenders are being approved by the Treasury. These loans don't require a personal guarantee or collateral, and the maximum loan is basically based on 2.5 months of your payroll. So you basically take your payroll costs over the last year, and you multiply that by 2.5, and you've come up with your 2.5 months, but it's not to exceed $10 million. Additionally, any individuals who earn over $100,000, that excess amount is not included in the calculation. So for example, if somebody is making $125,000, $25,000 of that does not count. And when we're talking about payroll costs, we're talking about everything. It's not just actual salary. It's salary, wages, commissions, cash tips. It's payment for vacation or medical or family leave, or your health insurance, your group health coverage. It's retirement and state and local taxes. If you're an independent contractor or sole proprietor, it's whatever you've earned, kind of your net earnings over, from self-employment. So you're looking at everything in that 2.5 months. The way it works, though, is the portion of the loan that is used, so you can only use this money for specific things: payroll, interest rate on mortgage payments, rent, and utilities. The portion of the loan that is used for those things, and 75% of it does have to be used on payroll, but the other 25% could be used on those other things. The portion of the loan that is spent in that first 8 weeks after you've gotten the money, that's what's forgiven. So if there's anything left after that 8 weeks, the loan is then subject to that 1% interest rate, with payments being deferred for 6 months. As I mentioned, though, with the Main Street Lending Program, there are some requirements. If an employer decreases the number of full-time employees, then the amount of forgiveness is also decreased. If you reduce salaries or wages more than 25%, then the amount of forgiveness is also decreased. It's all about keeping everybody on payroll while also keeping the business liquid. Now, in some cases, I do know that employers may have already laid off employees, and if that's happened, or if there were wage reductions that happened between February 15th and April 26th, then companies have until June 30th to bring them back on board and make everybody whole. If you reduce staff or wages after April 26th, that's when the loan forgiveness problems, or you don't make everybody whole and you've already done it, that's when the loan forgiveness will start to be reduced. Now, at the moment, the loans are first come, first serve. I know that some banks are saying that you need to already have a business relationship with them in order to be able to participate. Those are bank requirements. They're not requirements in the law. So I encourage you to look at other banks if you're encountering some of those problems. We know that the money is going quickly. We're expecting that Congress is going to add more money to this. Both sides of the aisle have said that this is what they plan to do. So it's more a matter of working out the details. Some members of Congress would like to put some more restrictions on, like having more money going towards minority-owned businesses or women-owned businesses, making sure that community banks are being able to participate more fully, that sort of thing. But they will work that out. So there will be more money. They're talking about another $250 billion to go into the program. And then finally, let me quickly talk about the EIDL loans, the Economic Injury and Disaster Loans. Now, this program is a 60-year program. It has been around. It's not meant as a quick cash relief program as much as it's meant as a program that is it's loans for rebuilding, right? It's loans for capital to rebuild. They have changed some of the requirements of the program to kind of help with liquidity issues, but it is important to remember that this loan, the purposes are different. Now, while this was not in the law, SBA, the Small Business Administration, has come out and said that in order to spread the money around as much as possible, they are capping the amount of loans being given at $25,000. Now, these loans can go to small businesses and all nonprofits, including 501c6s with fewer than 500 employees. I know there is some confusion about that, but 501c6s are eligible for the EIDL loans, as are self-employed, sole proprietor, and independent contractors. Now, these loans are up to 30-year terms with a 2.75% interest rate for nonprofits and a 3.75% interest rate for everyone else, and payments can be deferred up to a year. The loans are based on credit score and also don't require a personal guarantee or collateral. And then borrowers can receive a up to $10,000 emergency grant within 3 days of the application being approved. This money also similarly is supposed to be used on leave and payroll and increased costs because of supply chain disruption, problems that are being encountered because of COVID-19. If you have an EIDL loan and participate in PPP, which you are allowed to do, the money cannot be used for the same purposes. So for example, you're using your payroll money, using some of the loan to pay for payroll, that's going to come out of your PPP. So maybe you're using your EIDL loan to deal with supply chain cost disruptions. That said, whatever is forgiven, let's say you get the $10,000 in emergency grant, that money then comes out of what is forgiven under your PPP. And obviously you can't have more forgiven under your PPP than you actually took out in terms of a loan. So I
Allison,
know I ran through fast, but
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to ask as a follow-up on the EIDL loans. We did get a question if 501c4s are eligible.
yes, they are. All nonprofits are eligible for the EIDL loans,
Okay. And could you,
but not the PPP.
right, just the EIDL loan programs.
Right.
Another question, if you could kind of just repeat that, is in reference to 501c6s and their eligibility. I know quite a few of the people on the call, and especially some of our local chambers in Tennessee, are paying particular attention to that, as you know. So if you could talk a little bit about that, and maybe if you anticipate that being included in Phase 4 legislation.
Sure. So here's what happened. One of the big things, one of the big congressional concerns with the 501c6s is that there are some 501c6s, and the U.S. Chamber is one of them, that we are, that there's a lot of lobbying that happens. And so the idea of giving the money into lobbying organizations is a problem for a number of members of Congress. So what, and what the U.S. Chamber has been saying all along is that not all state and local chambers are lobbying organizations, and we are very, very aware of how much you all need access to these funds as well. And so, we appreciate everybody who signed on to the letter that the Chamber sent up to Congress before the vote on Phase 3. There will be another letter coming out, and more advocacy is being done. I strongly encourage you to weigh in with both your senators and your members of Congress, your representatives, to make sure that they are aware of this issue. But in particular, weigh in with your senators. I don't know that they're hearing enough about the concerns about this, and we're really trying to elevate that. What we're trying to work on is language that would, when Phase 4 happens, because honestly, the C6 language is not going to be included in whatever the increase is in the, the $250 billion in the PPP program. This is really going to have to be a Phase 4 discussion. However, we are trying to get that to be part of the discussion. What we've already done is we've already started providing language to members of Congress that basically would exclude lobbying organizations, but not C6s. So defining who is a lobbyist versus who's a C6. And so in many ways that might still capture some chambers and it won't help everybody, but it should help the majority of state and local chambers if we're able to do that.
Great. Thank you for kind of elaborating on that. Like I said, I know we're getting multiple comments about you, one, providing an excellent review of all these programs, but in particular, the nonprofit status and how that's applicable is of high interest to a lot of people on the call. Let's see. Is it okay if I ask a few questions? I know your timeline.
I'm fine. My timeline is fine. So however many, I'm happy to answer.
This is a question in regards to being a subsidiary of a foreign corporation. If a company has less than 50 employees, but is a wholly owned subsidiary of a foreign corporation with more than 500 employees, are they eligible for the PPP program? And secondly, does this status eliminate them from most programs?
So the company with, let me answer this two ways. If the company had less than 500 employees, they could apply for the PPP. There is no requirement of being a U.S. company or U.S. owned to participate in the PPP, but the money has to go only to employees who are based in the United States. It cannot go to U.S. employees based elsewhere. If they are more than 500 employees, they're not eligible for the PPP anyway. Then they would start looking at something like the Main Street program. And my understanding is that the Main Street program is going to have a requirement that they are a U.S. company. So if they're more than 20% foreign owned, I think that there's going to be problems applying for the Main Street Business Lending Program.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll do one more question and then kind of wrap up just to keep us on time and keep you going with your day. Are there any efforts to change the rules on the 8-week forgiveness period to where it may not start until the shelter in place order is lifted?
No, not only that, but the whole purpose of the program is to try to keep everybody on payroll, even if the business itself is not functioning and opening. That is actually the purpose of the program. So that's not something that is being discussed.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking these questions. I know we've got a bunch of them also still rolling in, so we'll touch base with you again and see if we can get some answers to those lingering questions.
Fantastic. I'm happy to answer. And thanks again for having me.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for all that the U.S. Chamber is doing for all of us, not only in Tennessee, but across the country.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks. And Ryan, looks like we are going to send it over to you. Give me just a second. All right.
Well, thanks everyone, and thank you, Allison. This brings us to our last part of the program. I'm Ryan King, our Government Affairs Department at the Tennessee Chamber, and thanks for everybody for getting on here. We've really got a special treat here, and we've got Congressman John Rose and Senator Blackburn who are joining us. I think we've already spotted both of them, so let's do a quick mic check to make sure everybody is connected. Congressman Rose, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you.
Hello, sir. Thanks for joining us. Senator Blackburn, are you connected okay? Okay, I think she's joining Carolyn by phone, so we may need to spotlight her phone number.
Oh, perfect. That's what it is. I'm looking for that.
While we're doing that, Congressman, thanks again for joining us. Maybe just some opening comments. What have the past couple of weeks been like for you? And maybe tell us a little bit about the CARES Act and Phase 1 and Phase 2 also.
Sure. Well, it's a privilege to be here with the group today. And I heard just a little bit from your prior speaker, and so was impressed with the level of detail and understanding that she had for the programs. As many of you know, I myself am a small businessman, just first elected to Congress in 2018, took office last January. And so it gives me kind of, I guess I would say, a better perspective maybe than many of my colleagues, in that I just came from the business world. I still have a small business. Like many of those perhaps on this call today, my small business is suffering. I just saw the grim statistics a little earlier today that our small business, my partner sent me this, and if you could read it, you will see that probably like many of you, our sales are down dramatically, down by about 2/3 during April, by almost 60% during March. So I feel very much the pain that many of those on the call today are feeling. It is now my job to represent the people of the 6th District of Tennessee, and Tennessee more broadly, and the nation. And so I have worked with our staff, but we have a top-rate staff. We've worked diligently over the past several weeks to try to help businesses and individuals all across the 6th District navigate these complex programs. I know you've probably already had a recap of this, but it might be useful, just as I kind of end my preliminary comments, to note that to date, we have put in place about $2.5 trillion, truly a staggering number of federal response to the coronavirus, those in the Phase 1, that being the combination of the funding in Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. Just to put, again, that into more perspective, that represents about 10% of our pre-coronavirus national debt. So a dramatic step by the federal government to try to keep the economy on life support during this critical time. I know that it is frustrating if you're looking for answers. I know for small businesses that are trying to get help and trying to navigate all of these programs, it's difficult. I would just say that I think, keep in mind that putting $2.5 trillion out in an organized way and getting all those answers in place is no small undertaking. And so it is truly remarkable that in the short period of time that has passed, we've been able to go as far as we have. Obviously, there are a range of goals in the 3 phases of programs that have been implemented, but they're all in the end aimed at keeping the economy as intact as possible during this stay-at-home period that's in place really all across the country, so that hopefully once we get to the other side of the coronavirus issue, the economy can rebound more quickly. So I heard your previous speaker note that, for example, the Paycheck Protection Program, and we get lots of questions about that program, but the core reason for that program is to help small businesses keep their employee base intact. So I know there have been a lot of questions about, hey, can I get the PPP loan and start applying it to my expenses after this 8-week period? In fact, the purpose of Paycheck Protection is to keep your payroll, your employees in place through this period. So the fact that you may be out of business, essentially not serving customers, is really not the point. The point is the government, through the PPP program, is trying to help you keep your employee base in place, so that once we clear the stay-at-home period, you're able to get back to business very quickly. Again, as a small business person, I feel that pain very much. I'm also a farmer, and so I've also been, dealing with the same issues that many of your farmer members across the state are dealing with. I applaud you for putting on this program and helping to provide answers to folks. And I just would say, I hope that everyone knows they can reach out to our office. And while we may not have the answers immediately at hand, very often we're able to get them quickly or to help you solve a problem that may be unique to your situation. And so thank you to the Tennessee Chamber for putting on this event today.
No, thank you, Congressman. And I think we have Senator Blackburn actually calling in on the line. Senator Blackburn, are you on?
Yes, I am. And thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for hanging in here and doing your part to keep this economy rolling along, kind of, as I say, kind of sputtering along. And our efforts are really triggered toward rescuing the economy and then bridging it so that we can get to recovery. There are 4 actions that Congress has taken to date. The first was $8.3 billion that went out to help with research in addressing the virus and the need for antivirals. That was the very first bill that was done. That was back at the 1st of March. Then the president had a disaster declaration. When he did that national disaster declaration, that freed up $50 billion that went to the states. Tennessee got part of that money, and they sent it to the cities and counties to help with added needs that were there for law enforcement and first responders. Then you had the phase 2 bill, and that was followed by the phase 3 bill. That's the 4th action, and that was the $2.2 trillion. And in that, as you have heard, the PPP program is embodied in that. Let me say just a couple of things about that program. I worked hard with Senator Rubio to be certain that self-employed independent contractors, that the definition of small business was changed to capture all of those individuals. Now, I know all across the state, we have a lot of musicians, songwriters, people that work up in Pigeon Forge in the entertainment industry, and they work as an independent contractor back to a venue or a company. So we wanted to be certain they got included, because many of them work in plumbing, many of them work in as electricians. And what we wanted to do was be certain that even though they may be working on a business license and are self-employed or a sole proprietor, they still have loans. They still have rent. They have those responsibilities to meet. So we have worked diligently to be certain that that definition was changed. I think it was appropriate in time to make that definitional change with the SBA. I've also talked with the SBA administrator on Friday. I'm aware that many of our female-owned businesses had an issue with, they've never borrowed, they've never had a lending relationship, they've had a deposit or banking relationship, and were unable to apply to these loans. The administrator is working, several of us are working to make certain that that window and that opportunity is there for those female business owners. We also know it's the bigger or the regional banks where we've seen most of the problems. The community banks have been really good. There's consideration about if some of these should go out through your credit unions or your retail lending, and those are points that are under discussion as we talk about how we bridge back to a time of recovery. When it comes to the funds that are there for healthcare, let me touch on that $100 billion pool. The first portion of this, $30 billion, was released this week from CMS. And this money is to go through the entire ecosystem, healthcare delivery ecosystem. Yes, it's for our hospitals. It is for positioning and utilization through some of the ambulatory surgery centers. It is therefore nursing homes, for making certain PPE is available for those employees. And we felt like it was important that that money be available throughout that ecosystem, because not everybody needs to go to the hospital. Many times, if you have an issue, it is better to keep that individual in a long-term care facility and to have the equipment that is necessary to properly respond, so that we save these lives, and it is as seamless and careful a process as we can possibly help to make it. The goal through this whole thing is to defeat this virus, to save people's lives, to get down the number of infections and community spread, and then be able to return our nation to health, whether it is through healthcare or through the financial systems. Also, in this legislation with the telehealth, you saw the components of increasing the use and utilization of telehealth, and our providers being able to be reimbursed for that telehealth. As many of you know, this is something that I have worked on for years, and providing that waiver through CMS, through the 1135 section, was important. This is how we were able to stand that up and move it forward, so that we have those telehealth options, vitally important for our rural areas. Also, in order to help our communities access these new telehealth and virtual visits, there is $100 million in this bill for grants for expansion of rural broadband. So we were pleased to get that telehealth language in there, and also pleased to get the language in that allows our healthcare personnel to practice across state lines and to have that reciprocity that is necessary to do that. Some of you that are on this call have contacted us, and we have talked about how we go into that after we come through this rescue and we bridge, how we go forward with the recovery. And I know the governor has a group that is working on that with the state. There is also a group that is working with the president on this. I think very soon you're going to begin to see counties that have no infections, no new infections, and have seen a diminishment and a drop off. You're going to see these areas in our state and across the country coming back online, and these supply chains beginning to fill back out and move back to productivity. I do think this is going to be a very smart, strategic, systematic process. I think it's going to be, as these areas get to the point where they have fewer hospitalizations, fewer new infections, then you're going to begin to see this move forward. Part of this, bringing the economy back online, and what do we do next, is going to necessitate that we look at tax policy. And some of us have discussed what would it look like if you were to say, let's apply the opportunity zone rules nationwide for not only distressed counties, but distressed companies that have been so adversely impacted through COVID-19. And then also, how do we make certain that we've got the employees working in a good, safe environment so that everybody has the right personal protective equipment, glasses, mask, gloves, and people are being properly tested, which is going to be a part. I know there are several people working on tests that would be immediate tests. I talked with someone this week that is even working on a concept very similar to a breathalyzer. We also were going to take some actions in the Senate. Senate Resolution 553 is one that I've drafted in the Senate. Congressman Jim Banks has it in the House. And this calls China into account for this virus and for what has happened here. They sat on this for about 51 days, knowing they had an outbreak, but they did nothing to alert the rest of the world. And some of you may have seen the Washington Post article today, where our scientific diplomats had expressed concern over 2 years ago, and indeed going back into 2014 and 2015, with the lack of security and carefulness at these 2 research labs in Wuhan that were working on these horseshoe bat-based coronaviruses. So we're going to push forward with that resolution. Second thing is, how do you make the U.S. and other countries whole? And this is an opportunity where we're discussing China waiving their debt. China owns over $1 trillion of our debt. And we know that our nation's security is linked to that nation, our nation's debt, and getting that debt down. And so there is discussion about how we would deal with China on their debt. The third thing is manufacturing and returning manufacturing to U.S. shores. Now, this is something that is going to cause us to look at incentives to return that, and also regulatory relief to facilitate this return. Now, some of you have called, and we've discussed my legislation, SAMC, which is Securing America's Medicine Cabinet. And this is the pharmaceutical manufacturing. Senator Menendez is my primary and lead co-sponsor on this. But we're looking not only at pharmaceuticals, there are others of us that are looking at other components of the supply chain, whether it be with technology. Of course, Huawei has been something that has been a concern for quite a period of time. Auto parts and aftermarket auto parts and electronics. These are all areas that Tennessee has a presence in these manufacturing areas. And our goal is to say, how do we incentivize it? How do we facilitate it? how do we bring this supply chain back so that we are not caught in this position of needing to be dependent on China? And let me give you one example as I wrap up. With the pharmaceutical manufacturing, and by the way, we had filed this legislation back the 1st of February, but with this pharmaceutical manufacturing, there was an ingredient we needed February 27th, looking at something for vaccine research. It was an active pharmaceutical ingredient. They are called APIs. We found out the sole source for this ingredient was where? China. China said, well, we may not let you have that ingredient. So they were willing to hold our research hostage because we did not manufacture this needed active pharmaceutical ingredient. Many of you are aware we have had vaccine shortages. You are aware that we have had a shortage of antibiotics. This is because things are sole sourced in China. There may be only one manufacturing plant that makes this. So turning our focus to advanced pharmaceutical manufacturing, incentivizing our universities to team up with pharmaceutical companies and say, how do we address this? How do we look at this as a growth area for advanced pharmaceutical manufacturing? That is where our focus is, and we are looking forward to continuing to work on this. As I said, this is a bipartisan proposal. And with that, let me thank you all for the great job that you are continuing to do. To those that are over in the Chattanooga, Bradley County area, we're monitoring and watching what has happened with the tornadoes that came through, and are holding you close in our hearts, and hope that everyone is staying safe and away from the storm, whether it's the tornado or the COVID-19. And with that, I yield the time back.
Well, thank you, Senator. And one question that's actually been alluded to a couple of times during our meeting today, one provision in the CARES Act actually allocates, and you guys have mentioned it, allocates $600 per approved applicant to states to increase unemployment benefits. And our benefit is $275, which brings an applicant's max to $875 in the state of Tennessee. Right. Tennessee employers have expressed some concern that it'll slow potentially economic recovery just by keeping employees out of the workforce, just because that benefit would be greater than what they could receive by working. Senator, over in your chamber, you guys had an amendment, which I think you supported, to cap that at 100% of salary. Do we see any potential fixes there in any future legislation?
We would hope, of course, this goes just for the 4 months. And what had happened, and yes, Senators Tim Scott and Ben Sass and Lindsey Graham and I had an amendment that would have put it so that it was no more than the max of salary that you were receiving. What we found out was that the state unemployment insurance systems are old, and with them being antiquated, there was no way for them to make this adjustment, which seems hard to believe, but that is what we found out. I think as we, first of all, let me say, we hope that this recession, as an economist told me, we want this one to be a V recession. We were down, V recession. We were down fast, and we're going to go back up fast. That is what we want. We do not want one shaped like a U, which is where we ride the bottom for a good while. And we definitely do not want an L shaped, which is more along the line of a depression. We need to get this economy back in gear. So we are hopeful that this moves forward quickly. And quite frankly, I think employees want to get back to work. I talk to people every single day. They are calling our office, one of our 6 offices in the state, or our DC office. They are talking with us. They are ready to get back out and get back to work.
Congressman Rose?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Can you, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
I think Senator Blackburn has spoken to the issue. Obviously, the problem, and we were hearing this really, frankly, before the coronavirus epidemic kind of hit us, is that unemployment should not be, a factor in keeping folks out of the workforce when there are plenty of jobs available. And so the concern right now is with that additional $600 tacked on top of the Tennessee benefit, and the same $600 all across the country. Obviously, how is that going to impact the availability of workers who might not be inclined to come back to work once the stay-at-home orders are lifted and the economy starts to get back in place? And it is, frankly, a problem. And I don't know that there's a good answer. One solution that I've heard a little bit of discussion around, and we may try to explore, is it's going to be hard to take away. We're not going to take away that $600 benefit, I don't believe, but perhaps there might be some way to allow people to get back to work and continue to receive that benefit. That's at least one idea I've heard discussed. Hopefully we don't extend it. I think it would be the wrong idea at this point unless conditions require it. But I understand the issue, and I think other members, both on the House side and the Senate side, are aware of it. And I think it does point to a broader systemic problem with how our unemployment insurance programs in this country work. They were always envisioned as programs to help people while they were looking for work, as opposed to providing an excuse to keep unemployed workers from getting back into the workforce. And so we probably have some work to do there in the long run, as well as how we make sure that the workforce has an incentive to come back to work as quickly as possible after the virus crisis and the stay-at-home orders are lifted.
Well, thank you, Congressman and Senator Blackburn. There's lots of speculation about a phase 4 piece of legislation, and I understand that is in the works. What, in your opinion, does the next month look like in the House and in the Senate?
I might just pick up, if that's all right, Brian. We just got word in recent days that the House doesn't anticipate coming back into session until May. So I think that it's going to be a little while, and I think that's probably appropriate. There are some programs that probably need to be addressed in the short run, particularly the Paycheck Protection Plan, Paycheck Protection Program that will likely need more resources as soon as perhaps this Friday. At the pace we're on right now, the anticipation, just was on a call earlier with Secretary Mnuchin, and the anticipation is that the plan could run out of available resources as soon as Friday. Loans being made at the rate of about $2 billion an hour, or commitments for loans being made at that pace. So the program could run out very quickly. Unfortunately, adding funds to that program in the short run has become embroiled in some politics. Unfortunately, the Democrats are trying to use this as an occasion to add funding for programs that have not yet expended all of their resources. And so I think there will come a time when other aspects of the phase 2 and phase 3 legislation could need additional funding, but that's not true right now. The first program that's going to need additional funding is Paycheck Protection. And so hopefully we can address these kind of in serial fashion as they become issues. My own view is that we shouldn't get in too big of a hurry to try to implement a phase 4 plan, simply because I don't think we've digested the ones we already have. Now, if we see a place where the economy is suffering, or where the plans that have already been put in place as they're being implemented are not getting the job done, then certainly we should go back and address those. But hopefully, and I say this with my fingers crossed, hopefully phase 4 can be about the economy, helping to hasten a recovery in the economy, as opposed to kind of a life support measure for keeping the economy from completely flatlining while we are in the midst of the crisis. And that's kind of my view right now. I know there's a lot of discussion, but I don't think it makes sense for us to, in the midst of this crisis, try to legislate issues with respect to issues that need more thoughtfulness, that need more time for adequate consideration in the Congress. As many of you may know, I voted against the Phase 2 funding. On the House side, we got a grand total of 30 minutes to look at it. Just to put that into perspective for some of you who might criticize that vote against Phase 2, in those 30 minutes that we had, we were told the cost of Phase 2 would be $50 billion. By the time the Senate passed what was supposed to be the same bill, the estimated cost had risen to $100 billion, so doubling. And now this Congressional Budget Office has scored Phase 2, and the cost comes in at $192 billion, so doubling yet again. So I think that should point out to everyone that hasty legislation may, while well-intended, is likely to balloon the cost and in a way that's probably not helpful to taxpayers, and ultimately is not good stewardship of the limited resources that our country has. So I would be very cautious about jumping into Phase 4.
Can I jump in for just a second and say my goodbye? I've got to jump on with another call, but I want to say thank you for having us on and encourage any of you to contact our offices, follow us at our website, our social media, Facebook and Twitter. Let us know how we can be helpful for you. And thank you all so much.
And Congressman, that's actually a very good segue. You've got lots of good folks in your office we've had the opportunity to work with, as well as Congressman Blackburn. Tell us a little bit about how we connect with your office with further questions.
Sure. So our office, obviously all of our folks, like I'm sure is the case with all of you, are working from home, and that presents some challenges. But you can always go to our website, which is johnrose.house.gov, and it has the contact information. Hopefully we're manning the phones. Those phones have been forwarded, so our Washington number, which is 202-225-4231, and then you can reach us at our district offices both in Cookeville and Gallatin, and the number in Cookeville is 931-854-9430, and the number in Gallatin is 615-206-8204. Again, those numbers you can find at johnrose.house.gov, and then you can email us from their email links from those from that website as well. I would just stress to everyone, lots of times we're able to get answers to questions, and it's a fast-changing environment. Your prior speaker was speaking of some of the changes that have been being brought about even as these programs have been being rolled out. It is important to note that Treasury decided to put out the Paycheck Protection Program first, because the hope was to get badly needed aid to small businesses so they could keep their employees on payroll and lessen the impact of the crisis. And so the other programs, Congressman or Senator Blackburn mentioned the aid to our healthcare facilities are coming out both this week and next week. The help to local and state governments is being dispensed this week and next week. And then the Treasury is working on what's called the Main Street Loan Program that will help larger employers that have 10,000 and fewer employees. That program is being stood up as well, and hopefully will be operating in the next couple, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. So, and lots of other areas where the economy needs specific help. And so hopefully the Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 legislation have given the administration enough flexibility to deal with most issues. There probably are going to be some places where we have to clean up some things. And so hopefully we will be able to take those on kind of a one by one basis, rather than seeing a big Phase 4 bill go through that might not deal with the issues as as carefully as I think they deserve to be dealt with.
Thank you. Thank you both. We've got some of the best folks representing us in DC of anybody in the country, and definitely make the business community proud when you're at the Capitol. Thanks everyone for joining us here today. It's been a great meeting, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So that is a wrap. And as always, you can connect with anybody at the Chamber. Just go to tnchamber.org and our staff listing is there. Feel free to email anyone with any questions, or if we can help pass along any of your questions to anyone who was a part of this meeting today. Thank you again, everyone. And that will be the end of our meeting today.